Our efforts to reduce noise aren't working? Fine, we won't make an effort anymore. Small MC. This morning I live in an apartment above another apartment. Since we first moved in, we got regular noise complaints from our neighbor below, saying that the noise of my son, 4, jumping off furniture is driving them crazy. He's not jumping off furniture, he's tripping and dropping toys because he's 4 and he's clumsy, but we apologized and encouraged him to be more careful. The complaints kept coming in regardless, so we bought thick foam mats to cover half of our floor to deaden the noise. They're ugly looking and I hate them, but we want to be good neighbors. The complaints stopped. We didn't hear anything for months until this morning. This morning I was dressing my son for school. He had gotten new runners that light up, so obviously the first thing he did was stamp his feet to activate the lights. He happened to be standing on the half of the floor not covered in foam. I also happened to knock over my sweeping brush on the bare floor too as I rushed out the door. When we got downstairs, the neighbor leaned out her window, yelling about how the noise woke her up and it's ridiculous that we're so loud, etc. I apologized and explained about the shoes, but she cut me off and said it didn't matter and that we were being inconsiderate. I started to get annoyed and was explaining about the efforts we made to reduce noise and she cut me off again and snapped, well, obviously it's not working. So, I said okay, if it's not working then we can stop putting the effort in, thanks, and left. When I came back, I took up all the ugly foam mats and put them in the attic. Screw her, when she comes knocking to complain again, I'll tell her to invest in earplugs.
Now to the comments. I had the opposite, sort of, happen to me once. My neighbor from above came to my door to politely introduce herself, and explain that she's a pianist, currently practicing for a concert. She gave me her phone number, and asked that I call her if I'm ever bothered by the noise of her practice. The building was well enough insulated that I rarely heard anything, but when I did, it was quite nice.
I would 100% take a pianist neighbor over anything else, and quite happily tbh.
Right? I almost want a good pianist neighbor. I used to be really ducking annoyed that my upstairs neighbor used to get people over at 4 in the morning. Now the problem wasn't the music, I can survive that. Neither was it the talking, it's annoying but I can take it. No. The problem was every single ducking time a good song came on, they would turn it up to just under max volume until someone angrily came to their door and demanded they turn it down. Over and over. Also, they eventually learned that they can't just leave the whole song on almost full volume because they would get people at the door, so they turned it up for 10 seconds, then down, then up, then down. I was about to murder someone. I complained and complained that it was a problem to everyone, nothing was done. So I volunteered to take over as the leader of the apartment block and sent her a notice that unless she reined it in we would initiate an eviction. She was pissed at me, but it stopped, like she started having her parties earlier, but they stopped too when the corona happened. My quality of life has increased many times over since then.
I wouldn't even had told her. I would have initiated a complaint. I had a bad neighbor for 2 months. After the first month I, and other neighbors, had enough and we submitted formal complaints. This person didn't bother changing and was evicted. I had zero remorse. Screw PPL like that. This guy played music loudly, seemed like he was literally jumping off the walls, and if we told him to stop, he would go blast his car's sound system. When he did this, he literally would wake up a quarter of the complex. At least 4 buildings were affected and the cop were called. 2. Not being able to sleep is true torture. The lady complaining about noises being made after 7 a.m. to maybe 10 p.m. should get earplugs or move. I doubt a 4-year-old is running around all night.
Problem is how hard it is to evict someone where I live when they own their own apartments. If they were rental units, it would be easy. If there is a working frame of rules, you could streamline it. However, before I came in, we didn't have those rules, and every case of eviction had to happen on a case-by-case basis, and none of the residents had agreed on an eviction clause. So, there I was. I could make this rule set, bring it up at the next meeting a year away, or I could send the warning and hope for the best. Now, she has been warned before, but when I warned her, I basically said, paraphrased, either you stop doing this, or I will do everything in my power to get you evicted, and I won't stop till I succeed. We are setting up rules that everyone has to follow now, but it's a lot of work when we got no material from before and all the research into what we are actually allowed to do, but it's almost finished now. Lived in an apartment in a converted Tudor mansion. The building was 500 years old and wasn't really built to be subdivided. Each floor had a huge 2 m wide fireplace. The fireplace on each floor was boarded up and schemed over, but the chimney behind was of lift shaft proportions, so sound really traveled. The woman in the flat above had drug, alcohol, and mental health problems. That sounds like a recipe for trouble, but frankly she was a good soul, and the only noise we would hear from her was if she was laughing at the TV. Her deranged shrieks and cackles echoed forth from the ancient fireplace. We found the best remedy was to switch the TV to what she was watching and synchronize with her noise. The memorable films, Home Alone, Airplane, and strangely Terminator 2 seemed to really tickle her.
I once lived in a row house across the street from a daycare. On the rare morning I got to sleep in, I was usually woken up by the sound of children laughing and playing outside. It was kind of a rough neighborhood, so I ultimately decided that of all the noises one could be woken up by, laughing children is probably one of the most wholesome.
I've been in stores and other public places where kids were chasing each other around shrieking with laughter. The mom always looks a little embarrassed, and I make a point to say something along the lines of, I love hearing kids having a good time. After all, they could be shrieking with other emotions. As long as they're not being destructive with their running around, let them enjoy themselves. Went to an Airbnb in Sydney, Australia, which I realized a bit too late made mention of a very noise-sensitive downstairs neighbor, but my friends and I figured it should be okay, just need to be careful with noise at night. Came back to the apartment on a Saturday night at maybe midnight, tiptoed around the whole place, and basically silently went to bed. Only snafu was when I went to plug in my phone charger, I dropped it and the charger brick clattered on the floor for a second. Next morning we were awoken by an angry shirtless man telling us that it's absolutely unacceptable to be so loud and that it's expected we will be back at a reasonable hour and completely silent. You're up here dropping everything on the ground all night. I was pretty taken aback. First off, we were early 30s and very capable of managing our own bedtimes without a stranger's help. Secondly, it was in Bondi Beach and there was constant outdoor noise going on beyond anyone's control. And third, it was just too hilarious that I dropped one charger and the guy decided it was an absolute epidemic of clumsiness. Decided we didn't give one duck about this guy's life and we're allowed to physically exist in the apartment we're temporarily renting. Asked him if he has anything else to get off his chest, and then closed the door and went on with our lives.
We were actually being as considerate as possible, but don't worry, we'll let you hear the difference tonight.
I could never live in an apartment again. Holy duck, I can't stand other people.
Me either. Our very first apartment was below a couple that had a very loose bed frame, and an ungodly amount of stamina.
I used to live below a couple of girls. One of them would have very loud sex with her boyfriend. Many a time she would cry, "OMG. You're the king." One morning, my BF, now husband, and I were heading out at the same time as loud girl and her BF. They'd been particularly loud the night before, and so my BF casually remarked, "Oh look, person, it's the king." The girl and her BF looked like they wanted the ground to open up and swallow them whole. Never heard a peep from them after that.